Welcome everybody to our Workflow Wednesday for July. We're glad to have you guys here today. And again, we're going to be talking about Flexi 21 and some of the new features, along with some other things as well. Today, our topic is going to be workflows inside of Flexi in regards to print and cut. So print and cut workflows inside of Flexi 21. And as we go about talking about these different workflows, we're going to be talking about some of the new features that we've added to Flexi 21 in regards to cutting and other things like that. So it'll be a really good episode for that. So Flexi has all kinds of different workflows that it supports. And so we want to kind of give a broad picture of all the things that Flexi can do in this episode. So again, we do these every first Wednesday of the month. And so if you're tuning in for these, check us out on social media for posts and different things for advanced schedules and things like that. On our Facebook page and our YouTube channel usually post something. So check those out. If you want to look at the old episodes, we've got a playlist for those. So check that out on our YouTube channel. And I will be here for about an hour after. So if you want to ask any questions from the session, or about anything about Flexi 21 really, post those in the chat or in the comments below, and we'll get to those, and we'll be here for an hour answering questions if anybody has any. All right, without any further ado, let's try and get into it with sharing a screen here and get into Flexi. Okay, so here is our Flexi software. We got Production Manager open at the moment. So I just got a couple printers and cutters here. So we got two cutters and a printer, and we'll be talking about those here soon. But first thing we wanted to do was just talk about the general Flexi workflows. So we have several different workflows that are available to you inside of Flexi when it comes to print and cut. And these are very common to some of the older versions, but there's also been some improvements made to them as well. So we want to get started and just talk about, if you're new to Flexi, or maybe you're not familiar with the print and cut workflow, or you're interested in getting into that workflow, this will be kind of your general workflow for it. So first of all, if you're using Flexi, and this will be our first kind of example, will be using Flexi for design and for printing and output and cutting. So the complete Flexi workflow. So you don't have to leave Flexi at all. This is kind of just your one-stop shop for everything. So we would import or draw a drawing and get that into Flexi. So in this case, we're going to just import something here. So we'll go to My Documents and pull in some sample files here. This one looks good. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that text down here at the bottom. So I'll ungroup it and delete. Okay, so I've got this interesting little graphic here, and I'm going to print this out and contour cut it. Well, at this point, I would go to my Effects tab and just go to Contour Cut. Now, by default, it should be set to this contour cut color, which is gray. That's kind of the industry standard color. So if you were ever to take this file to another RIP or something like that, they would recognize this as a contour cut color. So by default, we're going to talk about the standard contour cut color for now. We'll actually get into these contour cut colors in a little bit of a minute when we talk about the second workflow. But for now, we'll just use that color and hit apply. That really looks good to me. I really don't see any issues with this. I could make some copies in here if I wanted to, but frankly, I'm going to do that in Rip and Print. So I'm just going to go in here, click on Rip and Print, and this is going to pull up the settings for our printer and our cutter. Now, again, kind of a brief overview here. You're going to go ahead and set your copies, which I've actually already set to 15, and it seems to be just about right. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my Contour Cut tab. So it's already pulled up my printer, and I only have one printer. But I've got my Contour Cut settings tab. This will all appear or disappear depending on if you have a contour cut or not. So if we have a contour cut, this actually appears. So we're going to click on it, We have some settings for our cutter now. This is where I can set my cutter settings for what I want them to be in terms of different things like that. If I switch my cutters, so I've got both of my cutters listed here, I could switch, and now I've got different settings for those. So this is all going to be customizable based on the machine that you have. I can also choose my registration marks. Now, this is something where this is new to Flexi 21. We actually talked about it a couple months back in one of our episodes, the GraphTech barcode marks. So I won't go into much detail here, but this all new barcode system is brand new to Flexi 21. And so this is a new feature. So if you want to check that out, I would go back and look at that episode. If you have a GraphTech cutter and you want to know more about what these settings do, check those out. Also new to Flexi 21 is the Summa and HP barcode. So we haven't done an episode on this one yet, so we'll briefly just cover these. But it's for what they call the Summa and HP Opus Extra mark. So if I hit options here, you'll see that my standard registration marks just look like little black dots or little black squares. That's your standard Summa barcode mark for the Opus XY2. If you go with the Opus Extra and click OK, now it adds the mark in between the copies and it adds this black bar. So you can kind of see that in between each copy. So that is the Opus Extra. Now this is for the Summa machines and for the HP machines. So if you have one of those, that's something that's also new in Flexi that allows you to add those new Summa marks that are available on those new devices. So that's a new feature for Flexi 21 as well. Again, I can choose whichever one I want. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the GraphTech here, and then I'm going to send it as separate jobs. And in my first tab, normally you would choose send now, but in this case, I'm just going to say hold and list so we can see it. I would hit send, and then we're going to pull it up here in Production Manager. So Production Manager is where all your devices live, and that's where we're going to send these jobs. So we've got our print job here. I can double click on this and make any changes if I want to. And then I can also see my contour cut job. If I double click on that, it'll show me the preview of all my contour cuts and where the positioning of that's going to be. So I would just then send my print job. When it's done, I'd load it on the cutter, come over here, send this job using my GraphTech or my Production Manager here, this job. So that's your basic workflow. Now, the second example of a workflow is going to be importing a job directly into Production Manager. And this is kind of nice in case you, in this circumstance, you may prefer to use a different application in order to design. So maybe you use Illustrator, CorelDRAW, some other application like that that has the features maybe that you prefer or you're familiar with, but you still need a RIP and you still want to use Flexi to send to your devices. That's not a problem. We support that workflow as well. So let's just go back to Flexi, and what I'm going to do is we're going to create a file as if it were coming from Illustrator or Photoshop or something like that. So we'll just take the same graphic, and in Illustrator, what you want to do is, again, you're going to want to use this cut contour format. So you're going to want to create a spot color and name it cut contour. And that's going to allow you to import these in the way that they're supposed to be. That's kind of an industry standard. So if I use cut contour, if I send this to a different RIP software like Wasatch or Onyx or VersaWorks or Rasterlink or any of those others, that's a pretty generic industry standard that they would know what that is. So if you design that in Illustrator or something like that and bring it into Flexi, it's going to know. So I would have that color set up. So it has to be a spot color, and then it has to be labeled cut contour. So I'm going to go ahead and export this as a PDF. So export, and we're just going to call this cut contour. Or let's just say contour cut file. There we go. or a job. That's easier. Save. Okay, so now we're going to minimize Flexi and just talk about this for a minute. So let's get rid of this job. We've already talked about that. And let's just import a job directly into Production Manager. So I'm going to click here, say Add Job. And then I can import my contour cut job. And the great thing is here is when I add this, it's going to load this job in, and we're going to take a look at this job. Because we had a contour cut set as contour cut or cut contour, when I double click on this and I go to my second tab, this is going to actually show me these available options. So if there's no contour cut, all this stuff is going to be grayed out normally. So you won't see any of these options available. But if the contour cut is set up correctly, now I'm going to be able to see this option here for print and contour. I can choose which device I want to send it to, and I can hit send. So at this point, I go ahead and hit send. And now you're not going to see this. So I'm going to hit save here. The reason why I have to click on that is because I actually don't have a Muto connected to me. So I'm just setting it to file. So it's just asking me where to put it, but that's okay. So we're going to let it rip, and then we're going to let it print. And then you'll notice that now under my graph tech, I have this new job that I just sent to it. So now I can take this job and send it to the cutter however I want to. So that's one way that you can do that. If you're importing jobs right into the Production Manager and sending them that way, this is a workflow that works. So again, if you prefer to design somewhere else, but you want Flexi to handle the production, this is one way that you can do that, is importing jobs directly in. Now, something that we will note about this is a new feature. So this is, we're going to plug in a new feature here. So remember I talked about that contour cut needing to be set as a cut contour color. Well, here's what I can do, is I can actually go into my graph tech here, and if I click on default job properties, and I go to my contour cut tab or my cut tab, I can actually add in custom cut line colors. So this is a brand new feature to Flexi 21 is custom cut line names and colors. So I created this one and I had it set to cut fast. So I can just click on this, set cut line color, and what it allows me to do is it allows me to name the spot color. So I name the spot color, I tell it which options that I want it to use when it sees that color, and then I can change the display color. So if I want it to show pink, I can, or I can have it change the color if I prefer the color to be something else. Click OK, and I'll just hit cancel in this case, but you'll hit OK, and then it'll save it here for you. So now I can add custom cut line colors. So now I don't have to necessarily name it cut contour. I can name it bright pink and then set it as a spot color, and that can be my perfect cut color. And I can set up multiple of these if I want to. So that would be a really great option for if you design another application, you want to custom name your spot colors and your contour cut color. So this is brand new to Flexi 21. All right, so that's going to be a good option there. One of the other things that you can do as well is we have a brand new cut contour preview tile option. So let's go back to our job here. And oh, you know what? Because I don't have my job set to save, I have them set. You can set that in here. I want to, after output, I wanted to go back to hold. So that was my fault there. So we'll just need to re-add it back in, no problem. Contour cut job. So one of the new things that we've added into Flexi is when you're adding jobs directly into the Production Manager, we now have the option to preview your cut. So for example, I can take a look here and I have got all these different previews, but now we have this option for the contour cut preview. So I can click on that and it'll preview the contour cut right inside of the print job. So I don't have to send the job over to the cutter to see what it's looking like. So I can kind of make sure that the contour cut looks correct in the print job before I send it to the print and to the cut. So this is a really nice option add in for jobs in Production Manager. I can now see my contour cut and I can preview it before it even goes into the cutter. So this is a really nice add-in to that as well. All right, so let's hit OK here. And let's take a look at one of our other options for workflow. So let's go back into Flexi and let's talk about a workflow where we use a different RIP software. So if you use a different RIP software and prefer to use Flexi as your design software, we also support that workflow as well. So you'll notice there's a bunch of buttons up here at the top of our Flexi design workspace. So this one is send to Onyx, send to Rasterlink, send to VersaWorks Dual, send to VersaWorks. So we've got all these options up here. We also even include a send to nRoute option. So we've got several different options. Now this is going to be the scenario where you're sending your job to another RIP, but you're designing in Flexi, and then the other RIP software is handling the print and the cut. So for example, VersaWorks and Onyx, they all have those options where you can print and cut right from their software. So this would be a really easy workflow. Again, we highlight the things that we want to send. I can simply click on one of these buttons. I can change the file name. In this case, I haven't actually saved my file. That's why I used Untitled1, but normally the name of your file would show up here. I've got some options here that I can use, like send as EPS and things like that, or selection only. Now, I don't have VersaWorks installed at the moment, but this is the default path for this program. And so when you click on this, you will see your printers listed here. It says first printer here because I don't have VersaWorks installed, but if you did, it would show your Roland X device or whatever. And then you can choose which queue it goes to. You hit send, it'll automatically export that file as a PDF, and it'll pop up into your VersaWorks. Same thing with Rasterlink and Onyx. It already has the Onyx path pre-selected, and so you just choose which printer you have, which printer you're sending it to, and you hit send, and away it goes, and it shows up in your queue. So real easy workflow. Again, that's for printing or designing in Flexi and then sending it to production to another RIP. The last scenario we want to talk about is more of a complex and probably an outliner one, or probably not as familiar or not as used workflow, but we still support it. Again, flexibility is the key here. So if you use Flexi to design and you send the job to, let's say, to print on another RIP software, but then need to bring the cut back to Flexi to cut, we support that workflow also. Now, that seems a little weird, but it's actually not as strange as you think. There are customers out there that say maybe they don't have a printer. They outsource all their printing to another shop or to another place. It would be important for them to set the file up so that it was ready to print with the registration marks already ready to go. They send that job out to the printer, to the person who's sending their or creating their print jobs. They get the product back, and then they do the cutting in-house. So that's a scenario that we've run into quite a bit, and we also support that workflow. So in order to get that file ready, it's going to look very, very similar. So I'm going to highlight my job. I've got my contour cut already applied. The important thing is here is that since we're not printing in Flexi or with Flexi, we need them to print the registration marks for us. So this is where I'm going to go to my effects menu again. I'm going to click on contour cut mark, and then I'm going to assign the contour cut mark for the cutter that I'm using. So if I'm using a Graphtec, I'm going to choose my Graphtec. If I'm using a Roland or an HP, I'm going to choose those. So I've got an HP barcode here, or if I'm using my Suma, or what are the options? I have all my options available here. So if I want to use the Opus Extra mark, I can. So I've got all my options right in Design Central. So let's just go back to my Graphtec segmented marks here because I really like those. I'm going to hit apply. And now this job is ready to go. Now, let's just say you're just exporting it to your own PC and you're going to send it to RIP via raster link or Onyx or something, and then you're going to bring it back to Flexi. Then you could just click one of these buttons, send it over, and then you're good to go. If you are outsourcing it and you're sending it somewhere else, then you can just hit File Export. Export this as a PDF or an EPS or an AI file, whatever file they need in order for this to work, and they print it. The job comes back to you. So now you have the print job. You put it on the cutter, and we're going to use this option right up here. So if you've ever seen this option and wondered what it was, this is what it's for. So we're going to click on the cut contour. We're not going to click on the cut plot. That's for direct vinyl cutting. The cut contour is for cutting a contour after it's been printed. So we'll click on this, and now I can choose my my cut marks, and I've got my options in here for different things. So I've got these all set up here, and once I'm ready to go, I can hit send just like I would a normal job. It would read the registration marks, and then it would cut those out. So that's going to be the option. So again, in this episode, we really wanted to kind of talk about some different things that Flexi can offer. The last thing that we wanted to talk about was creating contour cuts in Production Manager in a workflow. So again, this was kind of outside of the print and cut workflow a little bit, but I thought I'd include it anyway, just at the end, just because this is kind of print and cut worthy, I guess. And so we're going to bring this in. So now Production Manager actually has the ability to apply a contour cut right inside of the Production Manager. So let's just say we import a job, and I'm going to go to my documents again, and I'm going to pull in a bitmap. So something that doesn't have a contour cut at all. This is just a TIFF. And we're going to go to all readable. Okay, so this is just a TIFF file, and I'm going to add this in. All right, so this does not have a contour cut. In fact, if I double click on it and I go to my second tab for workflow, you can see that this does not have this option is grayed out. So, and you also notice that the print and cut option is gone as well. So one of the things that I can do is, let's say we have a bunch of little bitmaps like this that we want to cut out. Well, I can actually just say cut along the page border. If I click along the page border, you'll notice that all of a sudden the print and contour cut option appears. And now I can choose which device I want to send it to. So at this point, I can come back and I can say I want to make 10 copies. Let's fill it out all the way to the 14. I can come back here and I can set the margin. So let's say that I want to, instead of cutting it right on the line, maybe I want to give it 0.125 inches. And if I look at that, the blue line here is actually my contour cut. So now I've got a little bit of extra space there. If I want to set that to 0 and cut right on the line, I can have it do that as well. So now we've got probably a little, so we've got a little bit of spacing here. So I'm going to set this to 0, get that right to the edge, and then we'll zoom in here. There we go. We're right at the edge. So that little extra spacing there was giving us some space. So now this is going to create a contour cut right on the edge. Now again, this is not going to create any kind of custom contour or contour cut. It's mainly for images like this where we want to just cut out the image itself. and we can do that. So we can add multiple images if we want to, or make multiple copies. We can nest, and then we can add these and then hit send, and it'll send that contour cut right along to the FC9000, and that would be one of the options there. So another quick little feature, again, this just adds another functionality to the software to be able to add contour cuts to a file. If we just want to cut out like an area around it and just have it available, that's an option inside of the production manager now as well. All right, so again, just to kind of go over the topics today, we wanted to stress how flexible the workflows are in Flexi. We want to make sure that Flexi can be used by every person out there. So whether you're using Flexi to print and cut and you're doing the whole process within our software, we support that. If you prefer to use a different design application and you want to rip with inside of Flexi, we support that workflow. Or if you want to use use Flexi for design and rip with a different software, we also support that. And then finally, we also support workflows for sending jobs to other applications or outsourcing, and then bringing the job back into Flexi for cutting. So we also support that. Lastly, we briefly talked about this, but we also support the option for send to end route. I just mentioned it briefly. If you want to send a job or a drawing to end route and you're going to be routing that out with a CNC machine, we also have a workflow for that. So the idea here is that Flexi is very flexible, very powerful, and we think that everybody can use Flexi in some way or another. So no matter what your workflow is in terms of print and cut, we think we have a solution for each person. So that's going to be it for today. Glad you joined us for our presentation. Again, I'm going to be in the chat for about an hour. So if you have any questions about this or anything about Flexi 21, put those in the comments below or in the chat, and we'll get to those and help anybody out who wants their questions answered. So without further ado, glad you guys were able to join us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.